underway. Welcome everyone to the inaugural meeting of the BEST Committee. More. I'll start by acknowledging Mayor Tim, thank you for coming, Councillor Robbie, as well as the regular members of the committee, in particular Sue Moroney, who has just arrived. Yep, you're all good to go with your name up there. So, and also want to acknowledge in the public forum we have Stuart and Hayley. Thank you for coming. And Andrew Ashton, who's going to write a beautiful report for the front page of the Waikato Times on this meeting. And with that, I will declare the meeting open. There are no apologies. Everyone who should be here is here, so we will just take that. And we will move on to the confirmation of the agenda. I will move the agenda as is written in front of you. Councillor Mead will second it. We will do this by show of hands. All those in favour, raise your hand.
Carried unanimously.
I was waiting for James to say that. James, can you say that?
No. My mic's not. The motion was carried unanimously.
That was well worth the wait. Okay, are there any declarations of interest? That's good. And now I will invite Stuart as for the public forum. Are we having that over here? And you'll have 5 minutes. Is this your first time speaking? Yeah. So it's pretty friendly. Take your time. If you keep it under 5 minutes, we might have chance for questions at the end. But enjoy it and make your points.
Is this all where does it go?
Yeah, it's on. Okay, sweet. Thanks for having me here today. Obviously, this procurement committee is something that from our campaign and your campaign heading into the election was pretty important. So we're pretty keen to see it succeed in its goals. So look, all I've got really here is a few questions, which I understand may not be answered today. But there are delegated, I was about to say lending authorities. There are delegated authorities for staff, and it would be interesting to know the dollar value of those from a sense of being able to monitor how much is being spent and by whom. Are these delegated authorities restricted to staff only? So any other outside members, consultants and so on. Are there any plans to reduce the delegated authorities in order to get better control of procurement costs? And what means or strategies are planned in order to ensure that procurement functions as intended, and what oversight will governance have, and how much control will procurement personnel have over spending and procurement? And that's basically it from me. Thanks.
Thank you, Stuart. That was nice and short. Are we able to answer any of those questions now, Gary, or alternatively we could answer in writing later and post those for the public to have access to?
There's definitely a couple in that I would, but given the completeness, I'd probably prefer to respond in one collective so that they all tie together properly rather than just taking bits in isolation.
Yeah. Are we able to have a time frame on that?
We should be able to respond within the next 10 days.
Okay. You comfortable with that, Stuart?
Yep, no, that's fine.
And can you provide us that list of questions?
Yep, sure.
Yeah. Thank you very much for coming in. Those were important points to make, and we should have a public record of those. Right. Righto, I will move on to the Chair's report. and I will take it not only as read but carefully studied by everyone. There will be a test at the end of the meeting on it. There are a few points I want to emphasise. Firstly, this is a new structure, a new committee with a new function. This is not business as usual, and we will be working in a slightly different way, focused on outcomes to achieve the Mayor's plan, which includes, among the 7 guiding principles, sensible, cost-effective infrastructure and financial responsibility. So procurement is the mechanism through which these principles can be delivered. I will note the public interest in the procurement maturity assessment report, and I am very pleased that the Council is responding. The assessment report had an action plan with 19 items. I do want to emphasise that Council staff have expanded that to 35, which shows how seriously we are taking the issue. We want to make improvements. Today's meeting is just a start. There is a huge amount of work, and in order to manage that work, I will be allocating some specific councillors with particular roles. In the report I mentioned the weighting of local businesses. It is our preference to support spending in our community, and that is something I will be following up to ensure we have a good weighting. I've asked Councillor Sue to focus on what we can do with our external consultant spend to see if we can bring in the skills in-house, because that will be cheaper than paying people outside the organisation. And I have asked Councillor Mead to look at transport projects. That's one of our major spending areas, and he's going to be digging into that to see if there's any opportunities there. And as of this morning, so not included in the report, I will be asking Councillor Mead to have a close look at our procurement panel structure to see what savings we can make there. There will be more tasks, and these tasks won't be limited to members of the committee. There will be councillors outside this committee who I will be giving tasks to, so that we can make as much progress as we can as quickly as we need to. Finally, there will be some crossover with other committees, so I'm very thankful to have the Chair of Finance, Councillor Rachel, the Chair of Community, Councillor Emma, and the Chair of the CBD with Deputy Mayor Jeff here as part of the committee, so we can involve those committees in looking for savings as well. With that, I will open it up for any questions on the Chair's report. Right. Deputy Mayor Jeff, I invite you to
Thank you.
question.
Thank you, Chair. Excellent, succinct report. I was admiring its succinctness compared to my CBD report yesterday.
And the timeliness?
Yeah, at the time then, you didn't have to go there. That's complete. Thank you very much. So you've completely knocked me off my... just a question about the external consultants work that Councillor Moroney is looking at doing for us. Are you? Is there a time frame for that in terms of LTP heading towards that, or is it a longer burn? What's the thinking there?
Right. My thinking as of driving in this morning, and not having had a chance to discuss this fully with everyone, is to actually have a catch-up with Lance to discuss how best to approach this, because we would like to be implementing stuff in the annual plan, perhaps as a trial to see if we can expand it further in the LTP. And the issue is, in the past we've talked about restricting staff numbers. This would be adding staff numbers. So Lance needs reassurance that the councillors intend to support this. So there's a lot of this, we need to reassure staff about de-risking things for them. So there is a bit of discussion to be had.
Okay.
Yeah.
All good. Yeah, all good. I understand it's it's not a small issue, and it's probably quite very complex too.
Yeah, it's in my plan of work, and I'll have a meeting with Councillor Sue and just get her up to speed on where and when we're looking at that. Just to Chair Andrew's comment, probably more facing towards the draft LTP, because there's quite a bit of work involved in just sort of going through the spend in each area and that sort of thing. So, but I think it's something I know Councillor Thompson's actually mentioned it about, whether we have consultants or in-house people for geotech or whatever. And probably an example is in Sean's area in IT. A couple of years ago, we had an outside provider for looking after our IT maintenance, and then we actually brought it in-house. We actually employed more staff, but it saved us $300,000 a year. So we did that analysis and made that business decision when our previous CIO was here. So that's just an example of, when you start looking at certain areas in detail. It won't work everywhere though, so I think I think we just need to work through that in a measured way.
Cool. No, thanks, Lance. That's cool. Just the second question was on the traffic management issue and NZTA's move to the risk-based assessment. That seems to me like that's been going on a while. I can remember talking about that probably early last term. Where is that in the process? Is it, and where is it in the process of us sort of being able to adopt some of that risk-based assessment?
So through the chair, the team have been doing a lot of work on it, and it's a staged rollout of that. I think what I will do is I'll get the team to write something up and flick an email out to everyone on that.
Okay.
Because I'm not fully over it. The team certainly are.
Sure.
But yeah, cool.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Yes, we will see the success of that with a reduction in road cones. So I think it will be pretty obvious when it is up and underway, and I look forward to that. Councillor Emma.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at the external consultants review, as we look to delivering roles in-house, will there be scope to include not just looking internally at HCC, but also neighbouring councils, that kind of thing as well?
Right. So potentially through our shared services and CoLab, we could raise it with them. Fortunately, we have Lance on the board of CoLab, so his finger looks like it's on the button.
Yeah, no, you did right, Chair Andrew. So shared services definitely top of mind. We're not the only council having this conversation either, and we have a lot of these conversations on the CoLab board. So, and there's a whole program of what do you call them, prioritised initiatives. But I think with looking at simplifying local government proposal that the government's got out at the moment is and looking at where we head in the future to be better, cheaper and faster, provide better value and lower cost to our ratepayers. I think all CEs are mindful of looking at doing things differently. And I think there are some good examples already through CoLab, like our shared water services arrangement, the water testing, which uses our lab at Puketi, and the staff now test water from, the top of Coromandel to Tikawiti and that sort of thing, which is actually saving everyone money. So I think there's some good opportunities there.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So can I just add to that quickly? I think Lance points to the fact that intending to do it because it's the right thing to do. The Local Government Act actually requires, when you're doing those types of reviews, that you do look at those options, and does specify the nature of some of those working with other councils types of arrangements that you have to look at when you do it.
Any further questions? Right, so we'll move into debate. The motion before us is to receive the report and to request staff to report back to the Procurement Subcommittee on the local weighting issue. The other points need a bit of discussion before we can push forward with those, and some of them can be done direct through staff rather than needing a resolution of the committee. Yeah, we will proceed with the debate. I will move the motion. Councillor Mead will second it, and I will kick off the debate as mover. It is often said that council projects cost twice as much as private projects. Some of that may be perception, some of it is true, for good reason. Council is designing and building for longer timeframes than the private sector and must work to a higher standard, which might start with a higher capital cost but can lead to savings in the long run. Despite that truth, the cost of infrastructure is not sustainable. I've met people who simply cannot pay more in rates. They are skimping on health, heating and food. We need to make savings. We can do that internally through job and service cuts, or we can do it externally through better procurement to save money on consultants, contractors and suppliers. If we do well on the external cuts, then we can avoid the internal cuts. My message to all staff is work with us. We, councillors, will work really hard to avoid internal cuts, but we need you, our staff, to adopt the procurement improvements and to go further to seek out opportunities to deliver the best value for money you can. Ask not what procurement can do for you, ask what you can do for procurement. Right, next on the list, I invite Mayor Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to imagine you as John F. Kennedy, and might just leave that for a later date. We've already had a reference to My Fair Lady. As has been noted in the public forum by Stuart Aitken, who's here today and who was one of the candidates in last year's general election, procurement was a dominant theme of that campaign. And of course it reflected the fact that the majority of candidates, and certainly the majority of voters, as far as I could see, were primarily concerned about Council's fiscal position, our high level of debt, the persistent rates increases that they had been facing and that are locked into the current long-term plan, and they were crying out for relief. So trying to find a new way of dealing with procurement was an obvious answer to the concerns that they raised. And I'm delighted, therefore, that this Procurement Subcommittee has been established. And Councillor Bidder, at the risk of allowing your head to swell further, you were the ideal choice to take on that committee, and I do thank you warmly for the way in which you've thrown yourself into the role. You have a huge amount of industry experience and commercial experience that I think makes you ideally suited for this. As you've already noted, infrastructure is hugely expensive, and I think some of our ratepayers don't understand just how challenging it is to meet the costs of infrastructure. In what is not only New Zealand's fastest growing city, but also an older city where a lot of the infrastructure under the ground is in poor condition and needs to be repaired. That all comes at huge cost. So it is vitally important that we ensure that our procurement is as robust and cost effective as possible. So I echo the comments that you've just made to staff. I thank the staff for the willingness that they have shown already to work with us. It's obviously crucial that we do that. I know we'll come on in more detail later in this meeting to dealing with the Procurement Maturity Assessment Report and measures to deal with that. But for now, I'm just delighted that this work is underway, and I wish everybody involved with it the very best of luck. And more than luck.
Councillor Emma.
Chair, I just want to start by acknowledging you, Chair Andrew, and your Deputy Graham, as well as Councillor Rachel in her role as Chair of Finance in particular for your work on the independent KPMG review. It wasn't easy work, but it was necessary, and it has set a clear direction and highlighted the need that Mayor Tim noted in establishing this committee. It will be a challenging committee, so I wish you and your deputy all the best, but I know you've already made a great start, so thank you. I also thank staff for their work to date in supporting in the establishment of this committee, particularly our CFO Gary for your support. What I value in this report is the emphasis on delivering real value to our community, not just through better process, but through better outcomes for ratepayers, for local businesses, and for our public trust. Procurement is one of the largest levers we have to influence financial discipline and economic impact, and this subcommittee now plays a key role in providing assurance that we are lifting this game. In my campaign, I discussed the need to look at opportunities for efficiencies by bringing things in-house, so I support the deep dive into external consultants, and know Councillor Sue will be focused on this, and also support the work that CoLab does, not looking just within HCC, but continuing working with our neighbouring councils and opportunities there too. I strongly support the focus on local weighting and reviewing the cost-benefit performance of this. These are exactly the kind of evidence-based governance we need, ensuring our settings genuinely benefit local businesses while still delivering best value for money for the city. So congratulations on your first report, and I look forward to the work ahead of us. Ngā mihi.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Jeff.
Yeah, look, I welcome the establishment of this subcommittee from the Mayor. And I welcome your role here, Andrew, because I think as the Mayor references, you've got a lot of industry experience that others of us haven't to bring to it. And your Chair's report, I think, is a great start. I think what I would want to emphasise is that, I think this is going to be a really constructive committee where we work staff and elected members together to find improvements where we can. Your Chair's report points out really well just the huge impact procurement has, in terms of 90% of CapEx, I think it's said, and 50% of OpEx spending. It's huge. And when I look around this organisation, we are stretched in many ways. I look at the central city budgets. I was walking around with a couple of business people yesterday who were pointing out, cleaning and maintenance and all that, and we want to lift our levels of service. But in order to do that, we need to be able to find savings. So I regard this subcommittee as a real opportunity, and I'm excited about what we can achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And Deputy Chair of this committee, Councillor Graham Mead, who has also got huge industry experience and huge amounts of energy.
Thank you, Chair Andrew, I think. Great report. I just want to start by saying, look, thank you to Mayor Tim for placing me in a spot that I wanted to be in. And as much as we talk about what we're doing, I think the big thing that we're working on now is this procurement, is this transparency for where we can, and with good information, deliver that to the ratepayers so they have a trust and a feeling that we're doing things right. We've also got to look at the fact we've got to remember what we already have as much as we want progress, because procurement also ties to keeping what we've got in good condition as much as building new stuff. So we've got to find a balance in there as well. Also on whole of life procurement, because buying is as much about disposing, and we've got to ensure that when we do buy, there is a disposal plan to rid us of some of those things that are plastic. And I think the other thing for me is, now that we've got some information on the panels and where they sit in there, to ensure that I start my role that you've given me of getting value for money and making sure we have value for money. So this is a role that I take, for me, really seriously. It's one that I'm spending a lot of time looking at, and I hope that as a group we can help the staff deliver everything we need to for the betterment of Hamilton. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you. Councillor Rachel, Chair of the Finance Committee, who this subcommittee reports to and who has already made invaluable contributions to the Procurement Subcommittee.
Thank you, Chair. I, like Mayor Tim, would like to acknowledge Stuart Aiken and his wife for their presence here this morning and for speaking in the public forum. I just want to assure you it's powerful when you come and speak, so thank you for that. But also I want to acknowledge Stuart's and others' testimony. Oh, and I should say, Hayley was at many of the campaign events with Stuart, and so she too can testify to procurement being a dominant theme. And in fact, when she wasn't at a campaign event, she was missed, and it transpired that the reason she wasn't at the campaign was because she'd gotten a bad cold delivering pamphlets in the rain for Stuart. Yeah, a dedicated wife. But both of them can testify, on a more serious note, they can testify to the fact that procurement was a dominant theme throughout the election period. And so, like others have already expressed, I do applaud the foresight in establishing this subcommittee. I think there was another theme that people were very vocal about, and that is the sense of being shut out of contracting opportunities or tendering processes, losing out to Auckland or Wellington entities without any visibility of local benefit. And I think that the focus on local weighting in your report, Chair, is appropriate. And I also consider that there's a real need to demystify how all of this works, because it could be perception or optics. I think the guide, which was produced as part of, which has been produced as part of this agenda, may help with some of that, but only if the public are aware that it has been produced. So this means good communications and visibility of the guide, which today will help with. Like others, I want to acknowledge that there are aspects of work in this committee which will be quite technical, and so I also acknowledge Chair Councillor Bidders and Deputy Chair Councillor Mead's expertise that will be very much needed to deliver outcomes in this subcommittee. I support your report and the request of staff around local weighting. Thank you.
Councillor Sue.
Well, thank you, Chair, and congratulations on your report and your chairing of this important and new subcommittee. So the first thing I want to say is to add to what everyone else has said about having a strong governance focus on procurement by setting up the subcommittee, I think is very much what is needed. And it's a very good thing, because the Hamilton City Council is such a big player in this space in the local economy. So not only is it important for our ratepayers and residents that we are ensuring that there is the best value for the best services that can be procured, and that the processes around that are transparent, but it's also important for the rest of our economy as well, because when a big player like the Hamilton City Council, if we didn't have our procurement processes right, that is actually going to impact on business and industry right across, actually in fact across our region. So it's not only our internal processes, but it is for the external economy as well. I'm looking forward to the work that I was approached about with regard to the external consultants. Thank you, Councillor Andrew, Chair Andrew. It is an area that I've had an interest in over a very long period, from my time as a union official through to being a Member of Parliament, through to being a CEO. In all of those capacities, I've seen instances where consultants have been used for work where it would have been preferable to have built up the internal capacity instead. I think it's probably most rankles with people when they see positions being made redundant from organisations, and those people then subsequently being employed as consultants at higher rates. We've all seen that probably throughout our lifetimes. I'm not suggesting that that is endemic here, but I think it's an important focus for us to have, and I really look forward to being able to build our workforce capability and capacity in that space. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Sue. I wasn't going to exercise my right of reply, but I will just use it to make one key point, that for the changing or taking on consultancy in-house, the key to that is actually empowering our staff, giving them authority to make decisions and supporting them in doing that. Nothing of what we're doing is anti-staff, it is actually pro-staff, and that's one of the big examples. We will back our staff in this work. Right. Putting it to the vote by show of hands. All those in favour?
Carried unanimously.
Thank you. We will now move on to item 6, which is the CFO's report, and I will invite Gary to talk to that.
I'm going to do the typical, I'll take it as read and then I'll say something about it. So I'll leave the report as provided. I think the one thing that probably can't come out of this in terms of the nature of context is obviously this being the first committee, we are finding our feet as we go along as well. We are obviously committed to and conscious of the conversation that's going on between the community and elected members and even within the organisation, and have been. Probably point out, I think this report points to the fact that we're trying to juggle a few things at the same time. So one of those is BAU, making sure that the procurement activity that we have to undertake to make sure we can continue to deliver services and the capital program is able to be delivered, doesn't get delayed and doesn't cause us problems. The second obviously is delivering an improvement plan that makes it transparent, that we have a sense of urgency about what we're trying to deliver. But the third bit that we're trying to do at the same time, rather than just focus on those, is also delivering those improvements that we see as quick early wins. So I think this points to, and Igor's report that comes, you know, there are things in here like having done the supply guide, where through this framework and this committee, we actually have a better forum for making what we have done and what we are planning to do in procurement more transparent. We're trying to increase the visibility on the broader outcomes local spend component, so that as you're having those discussions, it's not in the absence of information. So, you know, we do need to improve our data, but rather than wait until it's improved before we provide information, we're trying to provide information early. And then the category management, which is, again, is one of those improvements that is in the plan. We're not waiting until we've finished the full plan to be able to start doing those. It ties into the conversation around the in-house external, but for me, the piece of work we're trying to do is build information so that those discussions can happen with real good evidence behind them, so that we understand what we are spending and why we're spending it at the moment, and that will give better opportunities to identify the alternatives that you can do. So there's a piece here that we've started doing that work already, and I'm looking forward to it connecting to the conversation with Councillor Moroney. And I think the other piece obviously is this is not just about us and how we communicate to the community and work with you. We need to make sure that procurement is delivering that sense of change management across the organisation. So some of the things that you probably won't see are things that we are doing within the improvement plan that we're already delivering on to try to bring that sense of change management across the organisation. But, you know, it is not a do one and not do the others. It is trying to do all of those all at once.
Thank you, Gary. We will start taking questions, and I will kick it off with referring to paragraph 11. It mentions a timeline of 12 to 36 months. We need big wins in the next 12 months to inform the LTP. Can you explain how this action plan will be resourced to deliver that?
So there's a couple of key bits without getting into detail. Although there are 35 critical delivery items which Igor will talk about, in each one of those there is a number of set of milestones that we have to deliver upon. So they are things that we know some of those already. We do need to now flesh out some of those others. They will help us identify the resources that we need. I think more importantly, they will identify when is the right time for us to bring those resources on so that we're using anything we spend effectively. You'll see, I think, in Igor's report, we already talked to areas we know in the very short term we are going to need additional resources. So we're already building resources associated with documenting change management and process flow and increasing our ability to access data and report on it. But I think the next two components that we'll need will predominantly be around digital resource, so workflow management so that the process is faster, and access to the data in a more structured and quick way. At the moment it's too manual, even to produce the reports we've produced today. So I think getting the milestones will help us see that, and then I think it'll also help us identify where we might be able to target additional resource to accelerate the program. But I think we have to do that based on the milestones we can identify to make it efficient spend.
Thank you. Councillor Emma.
Thank you, Chair Andrew. Councillor Rachel must have been in my brain in her chair's report debate, but I was also curious in how we are communicating the publishing of this guide to the public to ensure it's accessible.
Through the Chair, if you don't mind, I think that issue of, we've put it up, it's there, how do we get it out? There's multiple channels. There's media sitting in the back if they'd like to report on that might be helpful. But obviously we're trying to put it through the website. We've deliberately tried to reference it in both the Finance and Assurance Committee and within this report. We've provided it additionally within this report so it's available. But I do think we do need to think about other channels that we can make sure that we engage with both supplier and the community generally. So it needs to be multi-channel, right?
Yeah.
So we have more that we need to do. It's not a case of it's done and there's no more comms about it. We need to continue to communicate in different ways.
Lovely, thank you.
Councillor Rachel.
Thank you for your report. My question is around the residual risk position of the risks identified in your report. There were all of the risks that were reported on at the Finance and Assurance Committee were not approved in the context of that meeting and were moved into a workshop that is going to happen in the near future. And the risks that you identified in your report were actually ones that I was interested in because the existing controls that resulted in the residual risk rating were actually our procurement processes. So I wanted to invite you to comment on that in light of the findings in the KPMG maturity assessment report.
Yeah. If I'm understanding the question right, it's a case of we have a number of controls around those risks at the moment.
Yeah.
Clearly, if you were to read those in conjunction with the maturity assessment work that we're doing and the improvement plan that we're doing, there is a need to improve some of those controls within that framework. So I think it's a case of if we weren't doing those things, I think we wouldn't have effective controls in those spaces. If we continue to focus on what the plan currently is, we will be improving the controls that exist. And I think you're aware we're trying to work through what the plan of control review looks like for the next 3 years as well, which I think can come back to test those as we've delivered them to make sure they're effective.
Thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Thanks, Chair Andrew. Gary, the KPMG report had a squillion things to look at, and probably if we look at all of them in its totalness, we probably will get not too many of them. Do you have a feeling of I know we've spoken a little bit, the feelings of the ones that should be the focus to start with, or are we in the right areas, councillors? Look, you think we're right? Because I can find a million things, but that'll just get me lost. But we've got to concentrate on a focus, don't we?
Yeah, I think we are focusing on the right things, and I think some of the stuff we've done already, we're seeing some benefits from. I would probably express that as, we're obviously on a journey of maturity and we build on what others have done. But I think some of the noise that I know I heard when I first arrived around, are we running procurement as effectively as possible? With some of the changes we've made since the improvement plan, particularly around identifying the existing frameworks more clearly, so not changing them per se, but making sure that people understood where those frameworks were and could understand what they could and couldn't do. That is a quick win for us, and so we're not hearing as much noise in that process, which means everything starts to go faster and smoother for us and for our suppliers. I think the rest of it for me is around predominantly first off, making sure our processes continue to improve, and then our access to evidence-based information improves. Because if we can put evidence that's data and insights that's well structured, then it makes the decisions faster, more effective. They tend to stick. You're not tending to go, okay, I've got this information, now I need more information. So, you know, the balance of those two is probably where I think our key priorities need to be, because I think they give us the quickest win straight away.
Yep, thank you, Gary.
Councillor Sue.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested in, later on in the agenda, we get to look in quite a lot of detail at the needs for delivering the procurement maturity improvement program, and noted a number of unfunded roles that are proposed. So my question is around what, as the CFO, what proposals are you looking at for either the annual plan or the long-term plan to address those issues? And are they addressable?
So I think the delivery of the first milestone over Horizon 1 and then the timelines for Horizon 2 will enable us to identify exactly what we need and when relative to the annual plan, so over the next 12 months. You're right, there are some that we're indicating we may need resources that is not currently funded, and I think we indicate the different options we could there, which is by the time we're doing the adoption of the annual report, we could put contingency in for those roles, or we could add budget as we go through the year, as we see that it's effective spend, or we have opportunities with savings that have been delivered elsewhere. I mean, my core principle is obviously to save to invest to save, because the more we do that, the better we compound the benefits. I think the work around the operating model, which is about defining the roles and responsibilities and who does what from a procurement centralised, decentralised perspective, in some ways that to me is part of that category spend. Should we be doing it in-house or should we be doing it externally? I think that comes through into the LTP. So I think the decisions on, at the moment, are we using external resources to support procurement, which should be done through central procurement. That was one of the things that was being called out by KPMG. So that change, I think, particularly comes via the LTP.
So will there be a specific proposal put before Council for the annual plan with regards to this project for funding?
So I expect that to come first through the Finance and Assurance Committee, I think on the 13th of May, and then from there to come into the annual plan as different options.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Right, we will move to debate. Do we have the motion on the board? I will move. The Deputy Mayor will second it because he blinked. And we will move into debate. Great to see the guide. The more businesses wanting to do business with the council, the better services and prices we will get. A personal thanks to GM Gary for his work on procurement. We need a champion at the GM level because we need all GMs and all department managers to proactively adopt procurement as a core function. I'm pleased to see you are serious in your leadership and you have my permission to cut the budgets of any GM who slacks off on procurement. Right. Mayor Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gary, thank you so much for your report. From time to time, people approach me, particularly if they know a lot about council, and say, gosh, you've got a tough job. Why would you want to do that? And I say, yep, you're right, but thank God I'm not the CFO. Could I acknowledge that you are still fairly new to this organisation and you're a refreshing addition to the team. Your commitment to working openly, transparently with elected members and throughout the organisation is deeply appreciated. And I particularly acknowledge that you've had a really challenging additional role while you were acting CFO for EY. So well done, and thank you for helping to get that important step for our council and Waikato District over the line. In the report, you've drawn attention and included the new public-facing procurement guide for suppliers in our community, and I warmly welcome that. And I particularly appreciate paragraph 9, in which you've noted that the Mayor's plan for 2025 to 2028, presented and adopted at the council meeting on the 11th of December last year, places strong emphasis on a transparent and efficient organisation, sensible, cost-effective infrastructure, and improved financial responsibility, all of which procurement plays a key role in supporting. And we do appreciate that. As has already been noted, we'll focus in more detail later in this meeting on the Procurement Maturity Improvement Program. But we do acknowledge your commitment to ensuring that its recommendations are acknowledged, because getting it out into the public arena was the first step, and then actioned as a matter of priority. So at this point, I just want to thank you and the members of your team for the approach that you are bringing to this work. A theme already of today's meeting is our desire to work together for the best outcomes of our ratepayers. We are committed to that constructive approach. Our ratepayers clearly have high expectations, and it's vital that we deliver for them.
Councillor Rachel.
Thank you. Mayor Tim actually just made the first point that I wanted to make, was in relation to that paragraph which acknowledges the Mayor's plan. And the Mayor's plan, having a number of themes, could be viewed, those themes could actually be viewed as strategic objectives of an overarching strategy. And so I kind of, I think that it is important that with each report that we get from the organisation, that there is visibility of how the activity referred to in the report actually delivers on at least one of these strategic objectives within the Mayor's plan. And so I appreciate that particular paragraph in your report, Gary. The other point I want to make is just in relation to risks and the workshop that's coming up. I am looking forward to that conversation, because I think it's important that we really chew on our level of confidence in the existing controls and the impact on the residual risks, because this informs all of the context within which we're operating. So thank you for your comments on that also, Gary. Thank you.
Councillor Emma.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Gary, for your report, and to all the staff who supported you on this, and particularly for all your input into the procurement guide for suppliers. I agree that councillors and staff must work together to make this successful. I see this guide as a crucial first step. Clear expectations and accessible information are essential for maintaining a level playing field, especially for our smaller and local suppliers who may not have those dedicated bid teams. I believe transparency starts with clarity. At risk of being a broken record today, I also saw how this work strongly aligns with the Mayor's plan, a commitment to transparency and an efficient organisation, and procurement sits at the intersection of this financial responsibility and public confidence, and this works and the guide helps progress on both fronts. I look forward to seeing how governance assurance through reporting, compliance checks and independent evaluation is embedded as these improvements are rolled out. So thank you.
Councillor Sue.
Thank you, Chair. We really welcome this report from the Chief Financial Officer. I think it sets the committee up for having good information coming forward, and a really strong focus from the very highest leadership roles within our organisation as well. I too want to talk about the procurement guide for suppliers in our community. I am in equal measure pleased to see it and surprised that we didn't have it earlier. So I really welcome this coming forward to the first committee meeting that we have on procurement. I do want to echo Councillor Pike's, I think, concerns that she raised via a question earlier, that this guide must not sit on a dusty ledge somewhere. It really needs to be communicated, and then communicated again, and then communicated again, and then again. Because I have recently been in a meeting where there was discussion from a health and safety perspective, actually, around a guide that had been produced some years ago for contractors. So this is the other side of this equation, that once people actually have gained the procurement, then they become contractors, in a guide that had kind of sunk without, people had forgotten that it existed, and it had to be resurrected and brought to life again, and again populated throughout the people who needed to know about that guidance. So I think there's a lesson that it should be reviewed regularly, this document, and also re-communicated regularly. So really thanks to everyone who worked on it. Let's make sure that it gets out there and it is used in a way that does provide that transparency and that strong guidance in the procurement area. Kia ora.
Thank you. We'll move to a vote by show of hands. All those in favour?
Carried unanimously.
Right, and we will move on to item 7, procurement activity. I'll invite Igor to the front to talk on that. Some of you may not have met Igor before, so I will ask him to give a brief introduction and some interesting fact about yourself.
Oh, thank you. Good morning, and thank you very much. I genuinely appreciate the opportunity to be part of this, and also welcome the conception of the Procurement Subcommittee. Thank you for the interest shown so far by the Chair and Deputy Chair. As a little bit of a background, I was Director of Global Sourcing for about 15 years overseas. I worked in private equity-owned global logistics organisations. My reason to exist primarily was to take cost out and save money. And so I was part of a relatively modestly resourced global community that took about just under 500 million of cost savings over a period of about 8 years. If you ask the global data research company Gartner, 97% of CPOs, Chief Procurement Officers, rate savings as their #1 savings benchmark. So this is not a new area for me. I welcome ability to assist Council in its new objective. I'd like to take the report as read. As I say, myself and the team are very appreciative of the Procurement Subcommittee, and we're also appreciative of the KPMG report. We, in fact, asked for it. It was of our own volition. We agree mostly with pretty much all of its findings, obviously not everything, but we acknowledge that there's a tremendous opportunity to improve. And I think it's also important to note that the organisation, just for those of you that maybe don't know, historically we have been a mostly decentralised organisation. And so I think if you were to look at the reality of our situation, some of this is not really around a question of capability or competence, but a question of design. So obviously we have the opportunity to now to change that design moving forward. But with that, yes, yeah. So just moving on to the activity report. As I say, this is not a comprehensive list of all the contracts that we have in Council at the moment. It's a list of recently tendered activity and recent contracts that were awarded. It does not list 5 competitively tendered contracts during the period with a value of 45 million, and we anticipate that those, the details of those will be released at the next June Procurement Subcommittee. It does list 26 competitively tendered contracts, of which the highest 8 are awarded to suppliers which have a local presence or a significant local presence. Professional services panels and the other panels, Councillor Mead, you will have details, we shared on exactly how those worked. We've seen pretty much extensive use of those 179 contracts through that period. And it's important to note that those panels have been tendered. So I think there's an important distinction to understand that those are not competitive tenders. They have gone through a tender process. They're effectively a pre-qualified list of suppliers for that very purpose. In circumstances permitted under our policy, 67 contracts were awarded through direct appointment. Of those with a value of greater than 75 to 300, approximately 31 were in the digital services space. We have released all of those and they're available on the council website. We didn't prescriptively list all of them in the report, but happy to talk to those as required. So.
I will open up for questions and I will kick off. In the council report, paragraph 31, titled Next Steps, lists 4 areas that you suggest that councillors discuss the level of insight they require on.
Yep.
So all of those are important, all need to be implemented over time. Will savings reporting, that's number 4, assist in cultural change?
I believe so. We have a savings tracker that's available to us. It's actually a tool from a previous organisation. That savings tracker was part of a accreditation by the Chartered Institute of Purchasing and Supply. So effectively it was the kind of cornerstone of that accreditation, and it provided transparency over savings realisation. It had an accredited methodology which was finance validated. In the time I was there, we used it to track about 3,800 savings initiatives over the 8-year period. But it has some real robustness around what is and isn't a saving, what is and isn't a hard cost avoidance, and the measures by which, the degrees of realisation, shall we say. So money in the air, money in the table, money in the bank, from conception to deal to we're actually banking the savings now. I've been working with Julie Sanderson. Her and I have it ready to effectively launch out again.
Very good. Any other questions? We have Deputy Mayor Taylor.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Eagle. Just a question, page 33, where there's a list of awarded contracts between July and December 25, non-panel competitively sourced. I am very interested in the fact that in the Chair's report it refers to we're going to get more visibility about local, about going local. I'm just looking at the contracts there, and there's 2 significant contracts that are ranked as 4, which means manufactured outside the Waikato, although supplied by Hamilton branch. And there's one that is 7, which is actually overseas head office but branch within Hamilton. And did local companies bid for those contracts as well? And can you give me an insight, as to why they may have missed out?
Sure. When we say local, I guess it's really important.
I'm talking about 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. So yeah,
manufactured in the Waikato.
Yeah,
supplied.
absolutely. Yeah, right. Yes, they do. Typically, we would always have local suppliers bid.
Yeah.
It's unusual. In fact, it's very unusual that they wouldn't. If it's a digital services contract, if it's something that's technology based, then typically no. For example, Microsoft as an example. But if it's something that can be physically delivered, goods and services wise here, yes, then we would. Now, the degree of local consideration in the tender process varies depending on the type of contract, the ability for the local impact to influence or to have an impact, and then also on the complexity. And that's, if you note in the supplier guide to the suppliers and community, it's actually listed there. We have a matrix approach to it. The reality is in some cases, other considerations might nudge out that 10 to 15 to 20%. Price is obviously one of those. I think I provided a report previously where we had relatively local organisations who were bidding against extremely local organisations.
Yes.
But there was, I think in those 2 cases, something like 25 to 30% price differential. And so overall that tended to sway the decision.
Yeah. Okay.
So the answer is it depends.
And so that's going to come back to the whole issue of settings, isn't it? I guess how we want that to be, how we want the settings to be. Yeah.
It's actually a really helpful question. I'm kind of processing as we go. This is an area, obviously, we've got the information is provided here, so it's a stepping stone in the right direction. So I think, Councillor Taylor, your question probably prompts us to go, when we do the next iteration of this, to make it more transparent, etc. How do we add that additional query that you're asking? Because I'm sure if you're asking it, members of the public and suppliers will be asking as well. So we need to hear these so that we know how to build those into our future improvements.
Thank you. Yeah, and thanks for the answers. And I look forward to us, looking more at the whole issue of local in terms of this. Thank you.
Councillor Sue.
Oh, kia ora, Igor. Thank you for the report. Paragraph 11, what is the reason that it's not an appropriate time for us to have the 5 competitively tendered contracts with that total value of 45 million?
Typically due to commercial confidence, and they go through a period where they are effectively put on hold, subject to being released internally. So that's a transaction, if you like, for lack of better words, with the governance team and with the executive members.
So it's for reasons of commercial sensitivity?
Correct, yes.
Great, thank you. So would we expect to see that in the next report or prior to?
Yes, to answer your question, yes. Obviously, if those conditions still remain such that we can't release them, then we can't. But we expect a flurry of them to be released in the next period to be available.
Thank you.
Councillor Emma.
Following on from Deputy Mayor's questions, sometimes local is not a possibility due to limited availability of speciality services and suppliers. How can we note in the tables that additional context to ensure that for reasons outside our control, we can't go local? Is there room to kind of table that so that there's more transparency on why we may not have gone local in that case?
I mean, we can by exception, certainly. I'm trying to think of an instance where that would be applicable specifically.
Yeah, I think if we look at the way that we're extracting data from the procurement process system, so if we talk about, as Igor and I have talked about, and this is dropping into the improvement program, right? So this at the moment is just an extract of data. Where we want it to get to is, dashboard and insights that I think will answer those kind of questions for you.
Okay. So, yeah, I'm a bit eager. Thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Chair. Andrew. Igor, a question on local weighting with the likes of, with some of the stuff I've started to look at, where a local company says they may be local, but they just have an office poked in a corner. Were we going to sort of look at some of those things to say that they're local and getting what I'd call contracts and then subcontracting? How do we weight those things to avoid that sort of stuff continuing?
I think that fundamentally, probably the easiest way to look at that or to answer that question is that we've got two ways of measuring what effectively is localness. Now, obviously, the simplest way is to say, where is that company based? Do they have a local presence? Do they have a local office? Now, the danger with that, as you say, is we want to be careful that they just don't have a post office box here and a presence somewhere else significantly. The other part that we can consider, and it's a bit more onerous for the team and for the tender projects, is to canvass that organisation and actually seek out what percentage or value that will be delivered through the tender project itself. Now, obviously, that's quite difficult for us to ratify, to validate, but that is also an approach we can take. But what we've tried to do when we've done a high-level analysis is to say, do they have a real and meaningful presence here in the city or within a close proximity to the city? The other element, of course, is what do we define as local? Is it a boundary, for example? So, I would argue if you have an organisation that's in Tamahere, then they're still local.
Yeah.
Can I? In some ways, it's the holy grail in terms of understanding it, because the next stage I can imagine you get to, because I've done it elsewhere, is it may well be an organisation that doesn't have an office here is coming from somewhere external. But then when you do the analysis, you realise that 90+% of what they're spending is actually still being spent because it's being subcontracted into local economy, etc. And so their skill is actually the facilitation of multiple subcontractors as opposed to, an individual subcontractor not being able to. So that's, we did it, as an example, in a different council, we were doing a building refit, and it was an Auckland provider within a rural environment. And it was really interesting to then go through that exercise with them in terms of how much they actually spent locally. But it is, as Igor says, it is a bunch of work, and it's not always easy to do.
Any further questions? Okay, I move the motion, the staff motion, and Councillor Rachel will second it because she breathed, and we will move into debate. Thank you, Igor. I know this report is first of its kind. It is a great stride forward in Council's commitment to transparency. We are putting up awarded contracts for public scrutiny. The people can finally see what their money is spent on, how much, and to whom. This is important because Council will benefit from informed public debate. Our city has experts and professionals outside Council who are interested in helping the Council deliver value for money. I may regret it later, but at the moment I hope to receive lots of emails and offers of ideas to improve procurement outcomes. Right, any others want to debate? Right. Okay, we will move to a vote by show of hands. All those in favour, raise your hand.
Carried unanimously.
Right. Okay, I'll just have some quick advice on whether we should have a break or finish the meeting.
I'm just looking at the members.
Yeah.
Keep going. All right, well,
Keep going.
We should keep going.
Yeah. Thank you. Very good advice, Amy. Okay, moving on to item 8, the Procurement Maturity Improvement Programme. I will invite Igor back to the hot seat.
I'd like to take the report as read.
Thank you. We can move on to questions. I'm sure everybody's had a good look at it. I will kick off the questions. The Horizon Roadmap, it took a little bit of effort to understand it, but it's actually a really good way of showing actions, strategies and times in a single image. But for the public who might have only seen it briefly, could you just explain the diagram?
Sure. What the diagram is graphically attempting to show in terms of the 6 design layers. So we have delivery model, people, process, technology, performance and insights, and governance. So those are effectively the columns of the design layers by which they've considered how we need to approach this. And then in terms of a timeline, so they're mapping effectively the design layers and then the horizon. So Horizon 1, Horizon 2, Horizon 3. Horizon 1 is the initial phase of their implementation roadmap. And then from that perspective, mapped out in terms of chronology and also or importance, the action items that we should address across that implementation roadmap.
Thank you. Can we accelerate the timeframes?
I think so, absolutely. So I think the key, as I kind of touched on earlier, so the interesting thing, we talk about the 35. I think we're going to find that we, as management, will be talking about the 200 because there are that many milestones in the individual components. I think we're working hard to get from this series of reporting from this committee through to when we come back to finance and assurance of making those milestones much more transparent. I think it's at that point in time that we will really be able to firm up when things will be able to be done by, and hopefully a number of those will be faster than we've currently indicated.
Thank you. Next question. The project delivery team on page 48, the program change manager, that's challenging job and implementing this in other departments through training. Is there a need to provide more resources for this?
So, do you want to come forward? We'll introduce you. So, Hilary is program managing this piece of work, and I think the addition, the addition of that resource to make sure that, you know, one, we have evidence, but two, you know, holding people accountable when they've got other day jobs is a critical component and not an easy job to do. So the addition of that resource, the other piece that we've added in more recently that Hilary's been able to facilitate is internal communications change management. So project management and change management working together. I think one of my takeaways is how do we make sure that through here and through other channels we make what we're doing transparent. But if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure.
I'm prompted.
Yeah.
On the spot.
On the spot. Hi, I'm Hilary van der Molen. I have worked, I guess, in and around council for a couple of years, but specifically, I guess, more in the project management space. So a lot of what I am attempting to do in my role as program manager here is to leverage off, I guess, the other skills within council already around that change in comms piece. Ultimately, every person I've talked to, door that's been opened so far, there is a really high level of engagement with this process and what we're doing. So it's bringing stakeholders together and I guess keeping it on track and accountable and transparent. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Hilary. If you have any difficulties with people, send them to Councillor Mead. He'll sort it out for you.
We'll do it together.
Yeah. Final question on the savings tracker. Will we be able to see running totals of savings?
Yes.
And will we be able to celebrate individuals and projects that achieve good savings?
Yes.
Thank you. Right, other questions? Councillor Rachel.
Thank you. Sorry, Igor, I think it was you that was, there's been lots of talk around milestones, and just in terms of the Horizon 1 document, I was wondering whether you could indicate if some points in time along those stripes, whether there is more activity at particular points in time and then less activity at the other end, because I appreciate it's high level, but I think it's good to give context to others in the room.
There is, and I'm glad that Hilary's here actually, because she's been really roaring at this with a hiss and a roar. We've developed, we've expanded rather in terms of the action plans, but also providing an action plan and a lot more low-level granularity in terms of those milestones for those action plans. Happy to produce that in the interim and then certainly for the next report. Our intention was to provide a sort of high-level overview at this side. But yes, to answer your question directly, we do, and those plans are being actively worked on, literally as we speak.
Excellent, thank you. And I think, sorry, this question is in relation to the actual, the KPMG procurement strategy and operating model document that was produced in August last year that was attached to the Chair's report in the Finance Committee. And in that document, there is Horizon 1, Horizon 2 and Horizon 3.
Yes.
And what we have before us is only in reference to Horizon 1. Could I invite you to comment on Horizon 2 and 3? Yes. Just in terms of, I think, perhaps timeframes or next steps. So what is the thinking in terms of that?
May I speak? Yeah. Thanks for the question. So ultimately, Horizon 1 sets up a foundational level. So it's about looking at what is there, what can be improved. Pieces of that do relate to technology, enabling some of those processes and the way that we then provide that transparency and reporting in bits and pieces. So Horizon 2 then builds on all of that activity and looks to actually implement technology changes at that point. So after following business cases, RFP processes, etc., we would then be making that implementation piece around trying to reflect that gain. And then Horizon 3 goes further to then optimise what's happening. So relook at what's being done, how that technology has been implemented to support and ensure that we have that continuous improvement lens laid over everything.
Right, excellent, thank you.
I might just jump in there.
Yeah.
I think what we need to do is just, so you got the full picture, and as Igor said, it's sort of like a bit of a high-level sort of blobby chart type thing. And there's a whole lot of work in those months there and that sort of thing. And you sort of look at procurement planning, and it sort of seems to go on until June next year or something. But there's a whole lot of work chunked into the earlier stages of that. So we need to give you a bit more granularity. But I think what we need to do is sit down with Chair Andrew, Deputy Chair Graham, and yourself as Chair of Finance. I say we, a bunch of our staff, and just actually take you through it, because we want to come back to the Finance Committee. I think someone's drafted up some words to that effect. Come back to the Finance and Assurance Committee with the sort of the full picture on the program with those timeframes, and to Councillor Sue's questioning earlier on around resources, then we'll be a bit firmer around what resources we need and when, and so is it we need to come back to the Finance Committee to ask for that, or is it an LTP discussion? They'll probably end up butting up together, because we're getting into the LTP pretty soon anyway.
Thank you, I agree. And final question is around, at the Finance and Assurance Committee, we talked about empowering the team to deliver the entire program of work, and as with the urgency with which it was felt the KPMG report deserved. And my question, in the second point context is, anyone looking at the August strategy and operating model and comparing it with this Horizon 1 document would see that the time frame for completion for some of these things is actually 6 months later than projected in that document. And then they would also see that Horizon 2 would be largely complete by July 2027. And so what I'm opening, well, the question is really, how have you addressed that sense of urgency in your Horizon 1? Has it been addressed? Can we take comfort from these new timeframes?
I think, Gary provided enough.
Yes.
So I can see.
So I think it's interesting, the use of visuals, right?
Yep.
The KPMG report in August, when you look at the delivery, they tend to be quite dark at the front end and quite light at the back end, which implies that the majority of the benefits delivered early on. Here, because we've got the blobs at the end, it looks like it doesn't get delivered until the end. So I think the key for us is, as we've said, now it's repetitive, is to build it so it's more transparent where the majority of the deliverable is. If I give a really classic example here, we're trying to make sure we're transparent in what we're trying to do, and then when we say we've done it, it's really evident that there's something we can point to that we've done. One of the challenges here, for example, is procurement planning. So that line 2 on page 461, which says, okay, it doesn't get delivered until June 2027, which is, immediately with the LTP. Well, we need improvement before we get there. If you were actually to do that as, I think, a piece of work in terms of volume, you will find that 80% of it is in the first 6 months, and the rest is actually there because to tick that action off and say we've done it, we need to demonstrate that we have a work plan that sits over top of the LTP projects. We can't do that until we have the actual LTP itself. So it's a piece of work at the very end. So I think when we do that, we'll also be able to overlay Horizon 2, and I think you'll see that Horizon 2 slots into some of the earlier gaps as well, and a majority of that gets delivered before we get to that July period. So it's not a case of there's this through to July and then after July is Horizon 2.
Yes.
I think it's a case of when we do the two combined particularly, you'll see that they actually, a lot of them still get delivered before that period of time. So within the next 18 months.
Yes, and so I assume that KPMG's estimations of time were without the benefit of the information that's available to us today.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, and then I guess the second point or question is, given where we are today in anticipation of the next Finance and Assurance Committee meeting, we'll have a reasonable sense of what could, I guess, surface in terms of Horizon 1 and Horizon 2 for the purposes of that meeting. And yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great.
That's our intent.
Right, Councillor Sue.
Thank you. I'm on page 45 of your report, the Horizons Roadmap, and I need help with acronyms. So, particularly want to understand the use of CP. I'm guessing what it is, but I'd like to know what it is.
Central procurement.
Central procurement, okay. So, the grey dots then. So, the grey dots then on that map are suggesting that that's already funded within central procurement, or it requires additional resourcing. I'm a bit confused about that.
It's definitely a mix of both, and it gets impacted a little bit by what we do in terms of some of those earlier changes. So we talked about what's the scale of central procurement versus non-centralised procurement. If we happen to go with that earlier, then it's capacity in here, not in CP, rather than outsourced.
Right.
If that bit is delayed, and depending on the scale of our BAU, we may need to bring in additional resource in that space. Sometimes that's not just in the project space, sometimes that's within the existing procurement team, because I've still got to keep doing the day job. How do we bring in some capacity to backfill them, to release them, to contribute to this? That's probably one of our biggest challenges at the moment, is actually how do we make sure that the central procurement team can still do what they do, but they are critical to us being able to deliver on this as well. So we need to work on some capacity issues there. I suppose one of my takeaways is we've probably overly focused on the resourcing for the project. I think what you're pointing out and what I'm taking away, and I know that Igor has pointed it out to me as well, so it's not just that, is how do we find that balance, and do we need to also be adding resource, not specifically to the project, but into central procurement to enable the project to be delivered.
And Gary, it's quite timely with EOI, and we're doing shared services with EOI, but they're also looking at some very big contracts and things like that. So I was talking to Peter Winder the other day about just where they head on procurement. So Igor's team will carry on helping them out, but they're looking at doing some things a bit differently. So we actually just need to be aware of that, and then we look at the resourcing that's required for us for shared services, and then Peter's obviously got to, if they're going to do something different, then he's got to resource that.
And also just to add to that, I mean, absolutely. So my team have been spending a lot of time, in fact, supporting EOI tendering projects literally in the last few months. That's consumed an awful amount of bandwidth from them, which is fine. It's just what we have to do. These initiatives require input from numbers of different functional SMEs. Procurement obviously being one of the primary ones, and so therefore our challenge is to be able to address business as usual whilst being able to be the delivery owners and the inputters into the areas that are specifically around procurement. But there's others as well. I mean, so we require, for example, digital services. There's a bunch of technology initiatives here that will require a lot of their input. And also then we're not just acting in a vacuum where we're just rolling these action items out. They need to be collaborative, and we need buy-in, and it needs to work within the organisation. So then we also need a degree of input and cooperation from everyone but central procurement who is doing procurement.
Right. So just to be clear, the use of additional resourcing in this context is resourcing that already perhaps exists within the organisation but doesn't reside with central procurement, or not?
I would suggest it's almost a mix of all three things in my mind. It is it is some resource that's already in central procurement contributing to this.
Yes.
It is additional resource that we need to put into central procurement in the interim. Now, for clarity for me, we've been talking about roles relative to budget. So finance has come in under its personnel cost budget. So there's some capacity at least through to June. But there is also, as Igor says, it's resources that exist out in other bits of the business, but not unlike, you know, project management. And I think in the digital space, we'll end up with some specific dedicated resource. You wouldn't have those as dedicated resources because you only need them at different periods of time. And so it's a combination of all three of those.
Okay, thank you. Because, I mean, I just note visually when I look at this, there's a lot of grey dots on this map, which is a lot of uncertainty, is what I'm hearing about where that resourcing comes from.
We'll give you clarity on the LTP.
Yeah.
Because we will have clarity then because of all the, yeah, it is complex, like you say. It's probably not as complex as it sort of freaks you out when you see all those grey dots. But once we get all that jigsaw puzzle together, then in the LTP we'll know that Igor needs X amount of FTE, that, you know, the internal comms and change management person is there for 9 months and then can go back to doing some other stuff, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all of that. And then obviously then EOI will become very clear on their procurement model going forward. So I think it's just sort of, it's like everything's in the washer at the moment, but it'll come out in an orderly fashion and hang on the washing line in a good way.
Thank you. My final question is not about the resourcing map, you'll be pleased to know. It's actually around the comments that have been made throughout this hui today around some aspects of the KPMG report not being agreed. And it would be, I think, useful for this committee to know what those are. And I think it would be useful for the public to know what those are. So I'm asking the question if you can talk to us about that now, or could that be supplied to the committee?
One, I'll talk about it briefly now in indication, and then we can work on supplying it. The challenges going back, so we can get the big picture stuff really quickly. And we touched on this in finance and assurance. I think the critical issue was an indication of a substantive amount that had not gone through open tender, right?
Yes.
So, as Igor pointed out, there are aspects where they've said, classic example, right? They've said it's not an open tender because we didn't run an individual tender process, but it was actually procured via a procurement process through a panel, and that implication is very different. And so we can look at those, we can give you some answers specifically to the KPMG stuff. What we've tried to do, particularly in the activity report today, is highlight that difference. So whereas the KPMG report said there's all of this stuff that hasn't gone through, what we've tried to say is it's gone through an appropriate framework. So it's not just one bucket, you've got to actually look at the version of procurement that's been used. And so we're doing that to try to, I hope, increase confidence that that bucket is not as dangerous as it sounds, because we can demonstrate through the reporting we're doing today that the procurements we have done fit within the right framework.
I just think it would be useful for completeness to know what those areas are of disagreement, and then we may agree that we don't need to measure ourselves against them, therefore.
Yep, can do.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Chair Andrew. I've got two questions. With the change that's been going on in the procurement, and it's probably a Lance, Gary and Eagle thing as well, how have the staff throughout the organisation accepted the KPMG report and then on board and the changes that are coming? I know it unsettled a lot of things, but how are they coping with the changes, or how are they accepting the changes that are going on, Lance? That's probably a Lance thing.
Well, I think Igor covered it, that I think everyone's got good intent about being better and, you know, better value for money, optimising spend, all that sort of stuff. I think that just people just come up from different angles because they're working in different parts of the business. And, you know, I used to be an operational person. You sort of get a bit sort of head down and it's sort of your world and that sort of thing. So they'll have their different nuances. But I'm not saying anyone's against anything. I think most people are very optimistic about getting better. I think there's been workloads and busyness and that sort of thing. So I think having good structure and actually making sure we resource the change properly and putting the support around that change, as Hilary talked about before, I think that then eases people through that, because you get, 20% of people love change, 60% of people freak out, and the other people stick their head in the sand and all that sort of stuff. So, so you got all of that. So I'm confident that people are generally optimistic about it. People seeing things which where they've commented themselves and it sounds a bit negative is always can be a bit demoralising, but I think that's just human nature. And my experience in local government is most staff rationalise that and then move on, and I think it's just about us having the right messaging and having the right probably mindset, as Councillor Andrew talked about in his chair's report going forward.
Thanks, Lance. Second question, do you
I'm probably going to comment. Hilary talked about the fact that in terms of us going out and engaging with the organisation, we haven't had any resistance. So that's in terms of us delivering. I think the other piece to be conscious of is some of that improvement space we were talking about is in that comms area. So classic example, right? So we know that we had a procurement manual that's fairly deep and narrative based. And so it's very hard to point to someone when they're trying to get a question answered to the exact point in the document. So a lot of work we've done is helping people understand what the answer to their question is much more easier, so they can see it. And I think that helps people in the organisation, because it starts to build trust with them in central procurement, that it's not a process that bogs them down, it's just something that's been documented. We can help them get through that really quickly through documentation. So we're finding that's improving the engagement between procurement and the organisation as well.
Magic. And the second question, Igor, can you explain a little bit more on savings tracker? How does it work? Sort of, what is it?
Yep. So the version that we've got at the moment, I mean, it hasn't been digitised. It's literally just a spreadsheet. What it does do, however, is it provides granularity in terms of the benefit type, the intervention type, and what we did with the benefit. And so what I mean by that, for example, from a benefit type perspective, is it a sustained saving? Is it a one-off? Is it a value add? Is it a revenue growth? Or is it just an underspend, hard cost avoidance, i.e., we did something to stop a price going up, which is a difference from we were spending $100 on something, we did a deal, and now it's $90. So, for example, then it clarifies in terms of the intervention type, whether it was a decision that we made, whether it was a strategic procurement decision, whether we utilised an asset better, whether we did something around a project prioritisation. And so overlaid on that, it also, I think I mentioned before, it kind of has a concept of degrees of realisation, from money in the air, money in the table, money in the bank. And the purpose of that is to track, an initiative from concept through to, in its place in the sourcing cycle, through to we're actually getting it now. So, versus I think we can save $1 million on something if we do X, versus when we actually start delivering that because the deal's gone through. So it assigns it, but I think also critically, it should be finance validated. I don't want to say procurement people around the world make numbers up, but there's a tendency that can happen. So it adds that further layer of credibility. As I say, when we used it in a previous organisation, we could point to a road transport initiative in Brazil and say, this was the old price, this is a new price, here's the documentation, here's the evidence, and here's the line item that provides the detail on it. And that sort of satisfied from a audit perspective that it was credible.
Thank you.
Mayor Tim.
Thank you, Igor and Hilary, for your report and for your answers so far. Given the huge public interest locally that followed the recent publicity about the report, and obviously we don't get to hear from you very often at these meetings, I'd like just to ask you, if I may, a few questions that the public are asking us. First is, were any of the KPMG findings in the 2024 draft report surprising or unexpected? If so, which ones and why were they unexpected?
I think, if I'm calling from memory, Tim, I think there's potentially a danger in presenting opinions as facts. And so whilst we wanted them to canvass our organisation and canvass staff, I would say that I think it perhaps painted a slightly overly negative picture where it's hardly as if staff are at each other's throats. I think there's maybe a danger that it presented itself in that way. So I don't think that was helpful. I think that also to Gary's point before, there probably wasn't enough finesse in terms of assessing the numbers, and so I think the number that got presented as not going through competitively sourced, I think was misleading.
Okay, thank you. And looking forward, because obviously that was looking back, and most of the people on this committee were not even councillors at the time, so that's part of the reason for that question. Looking forward, what do you consider the most challenging aspects for your team?
From my team, I think. Look, we are moving towards a hybrid model, and our organisation, as in fact virtually all local, or smaller councils at least anyway, are in a predominantly decentralised, if not almost exclusively decentralised model. Now, again, I refer back to global research from Gartner's. 5% of organisations that they canvass globally are mostly decentralised or decentralised. Now, that's quite a small number. 93% approximately are either completely centralised, mostly centralised, or hybrid. So we're joining a much bigger club now. So I think probably that paradigm shift, that cultural shift from being mostly decentralised to more centralised, possibly could be our greatest challenge. But having said that, obviously this is a move that's been endorsed by our executive leaders, and staff seem, on the face of it, supportive, and we haven't struck any significant resistance to date. But
so it is doable?
I believe so, yes.
Right. Yeah, that's good.
Tim, can I just add to that one, which I think Igor's pointed out the challenge. If I could point out what I think the solution to minimising that risk is, it's strong communication. And there's a real reason why, at the moment, the next resource after project management that we've tried to make sure we've got engaged is change management to help both process, but particularly how we engage with the rest of the business, so that they don't see that change as something negative, so they see that the benefits of that to them and have knowledge of it in advance. The main thing people dislike is surprises. So the more we can communicate in advance across the organisation, the more we can minimise the risk that Igor's identified.
That's good. Thank you. I appreciate that. And the other question, I guess, that we are being asked out in the community, or by members of our community, about quite a lot, now that they're aware of this report, is which aspects are likely to bring the biggest wins for the organisation and leading to better fiscal performance, and therefore reducing the pressure on our ratepayers, because that's what it's all about ultimately.
Certainly. We have a number of options available in terms of our sourcing approaches. And I think we suggested in the report that we would be open to discussing those further at a workshop. As I say, there are alternative ways of buying and alternative ways of how we buy. And for example, the use of electronic auctions is one, for instance. So rather than receiving offers via effectively what are virtual envelopes, and I don't mean envelopes given to staff, but envelopes in the sense of pricing being a static offer which isn't responding to real-time market dynamics, we could look at, for instance, receiving those by electronic auction, reverse electronic auctions, for example. Now, I can use those extensively overseas, whether that's something the organisation would be open to, but it's extremely transparent and probably would fit our purpose. The reality of the situation, however, is that it is a slight race to the bottom, and so I think we need to sort of offset that with saying, is it appropriate for what we're trying to achieve? Because there's a pro and con to everything we do, and if you want cost savings through cost reductions, through lower rates, through etc., then the offset of that is that we have to be quite, dare I say it, aggressive about that approach.
as we will be, of course, leading into our LTP next year. So appreciate what you're saying there. And then I will ask this question, although I realise it's a bit peripheral, on in paragraph 41, significant negative impact on financial strategy is the focus of that paragraph. I'm aware, and this is slightly tangential to that, but given that we are living in such internationally volatile times, to what extent do global events, sharp increases in fuel prices, etc., such as we're seeing at the moment, negatively impact on our procurement strategy and achievements?
They certainly have an impact. Yeah, I mean, the obvious.
So can you quantify it?
Off the cuff, sorry,
I don't mean an exact figure, I just mean give an idea.
Go on.
Go on.
Maybe have a look on Executive Update. We circulated a paper yesterday from Nick Whitaker about supply chain issues, things that are made out of petrochemicals, plastic pipes, water pipes, obviously asphalt, tar sealing, flowing into that. Two big commodities that we use. And then obviously we've got fleet with, using diesel and petrol like everyone else uses and that sort of thing. So, and then there'll be a whole lot of roll-on effects from that as well. So, and probably mainly in consumables, I presume. And then prices from contractors. So if they've got we have downers who do our Transport Alliance, and they've got a lot of vehicles, they've got a lot of people doing stuff. They'll be feeling the pinch if fuel goes up, and we've rise and fall clauses and stuff like that. So no doubt we'll get some claims.
Thank you, Igor and Hilary, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Right, no further questions. So we have a motion on the board by Councillor Rachel and seconded by Mayor Tim because he didn't duck. Thank you. Thank you to Councillor Rachel for her work on this motion. It shows the urgency we as a council are treating financial responsibility. I think it is very clear, so there's no need to speak to the motion. Is there any questions of the mover?
Yes.
Swap screens.
We can procure new glasses for you.
Thank you.
I could just note that B focuses in on the resolution from the Finance Committee, so we could just zoom into the last bit of C, so that you can all see it's so that the Chair, Deputy Chair of the Finance Committee and Deputy Chair of the Procurement Subcommittee work with staff to condense the programme, and as a part of the report back to the Finance Committee, that is included along with any recommendations of how it can be enabled.
Right, so no questions of the mover. I invite Councillor Rachel as mover to lead the debate.
I believe that ratepayers are wanting to be assured that every dollar of their money that is being spent in a financially prudent way, and that there is a sense of urgency in process and outcome because time is money, and any delay in improvements is a cost to the ratepayer. I believe the community is expecting a work program that delivers the outcomes with a sense of urgency that this deserves. And I believe that we, having heard what we've heard today, that is present in the Horizon 1 document in the agenda pack. But through discussion and work between staff and elected members, we'll be able to give increasing visibility to the milestones that sit under some of those thick stripes, and also visibility of the program as a whole, which I think is important given the original estimate of time for delivery of the program was 3 years. What's not visible in the motion is the expectation that we've been discussing as a team, that staff and elected members, that we achieve as much as possible without compromising quality, without impacting on the health and safety of staff, by the time of the implementation or the commencement of the next long-term plan on 1 July 2027. It would be great to have as much of the work done to deliver an outcome as possible by that point in time. And the final thing I want to do is really to acknowledge Gary and his team, because there is a significant program of work has been happening in the last 12 to 18 months before my time around EOI, but also with all the local government reform. And just finally, not only has Gary had to take the team on this journey since the release of the KPMG report, but he's now having to take newly elected members on that journey also. So thank you, Gary, for your work. I really sincerely appreciate you.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Andrew. I fully support this motion for a number of things. One is it's giving some surety to both us as councillors and the staff that we're on the same page and we're going in the same direction. And I call it some managed urgency, if that's the right terminology. And also the understanding that the community's been heard as well. And I think that's the golden thing about this is there's some now communities being looked at, they're being further from here in communication and making sure that we've got some time frames about some things. And I think they're things to be celebrated. It's not about cutting the lunch of everything. It's about sitting down and saying, what can we do a little bit better to alleviate some of the pressure on the ratepayers? And this is a great first start. And again, I'd like just to reiterate the help that we've had from Gary, Lance and the team. Yeah, hell of a decisions to make over the last few months, but thank you for your openness and allowing us to start down this track. And I'd like that acknowledged as well. Thank you.
Mayor Tim.
Could I begin by strongly echoing the comments of the Chair of our Finance and Assurance Committee, Councillor Corellis, and also Councillor Mead as the Deputy Chair. And I should have thanked him earlier for taking on that role. I'm delighted he's done so. As they have noted, I think the first thing is to thank Gary and all the staff today for the openness. The reports are impressive and the intents are all encouraging. But of course, as has just been mentioned, we must move at pace. I think managed urgency is a really good way of putting it, bearing in mind that by the fiscal year 2028-29, assuming current government settings continue, we will be operating within a rates capping environment where there will be a band of 2 to 4% for annual rates increases. And getting there is going to be incredibly difficult, but we must. And as has been noted throughout this meeting, procurement is a big, big part of enabling us to get there. So, as we look ahead towards probably the most challenging LTP that this council has had to work on for many, many years, which we will start tackling pretty soon, I take a lot of encouragement away from today's meeting. Repeat the gratitude I feel to all the staff for what they're looking to do for us, but we have to get there, and we will work as proactively as we can with each and every one of members of the team to ensure that we all achieve the objectives that we have, which I think are getting to being able to operate within a rates capping environment while protecting and enhancing all of the services and attractions that make our city special. That's the goal, that's the challenge, but I think we're all committed to getting there.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Jeff.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, look, I support the spirit of these recommendations which have come from the Finance Chair towards a more condensed work on this project. And I think top of mind for me is some ability to inform the LTP. And I think there's an understandable desire from elected members to move with urgency. You know, as a result of the delayed visibility of this KPMG report and the fact that from an elected member's point of view, the procurement maturity improvement program could have been moving faster in our view over the last couple of years, certainly before the CFO arrived. And now that we're all aware of it and working together, knowing that there's potential cost savings here, I think understandably. You know, we really want to get it cooking. And I'm really encouraged you know, by the potential for savings, which this council badly needs. So I'm satisfied that this, you know, the finance chair working and deputy chair working with staff can come back to us in May, and if extra resource is required, it's required. It doesn't get more important than this. And I certainly also want to acknowledge the CFO, and I have noticed a lot in the last few months the lateral thinking that he has brought to this organisation, and his ability to explain the unexplainable to people like me, which I have really enjoyed. And I also want to acknowledge Igor and the team as well. And I know you guys are working hard for us. So thank you. I think this is good. Thanks.
Councillor Sue.
Thank you, Chair. I also want to commend the CFO for this and all of the work that he's undertaking to ensure that we can deliver to Hamiltonians the very best level of service for the very best value that we can. I just really did want to take a minute to tautoko what Councillor Corrales said, because yes, a savings tracker is great. I think it will be a very useful tool, but part of my mind gets concerned about what that means for quality and what that means for health and safety as well. So I'll be looking very carefully at ensuring that we're not compromising on those two areas as we look for savings in this area. I think that is the trap. We've all seen situations in our lifetime. Gosh, I'm using that phrase a lot today, aren't I? Where the cheapest tender didn't turn out to be the best one in terms of work having to be redone because the job was done cheaply, and that's certainly not, I don't think, what any of the elected members intend to deliver around this table. So ensuring that we've got processes in place that track quality and track health and safety as well will be important in this process. Kia ora.
Thank you. Right. I want to emphasise Councillor Sue's point that value for money, not cheapest. That is our goal. Fit for purpose. That's the phrase we should hear every time. Fit for purpose. I have two big concerns about implementing the action plan. There is a silo mentality in council. That's unsurprising. It occurs in any organisation where specialist teams are trying to get their own projects done. I've been there. Outside interference with new ways of operating is annoying. I've been resistant to change. I remind everyone in council that we are all public servants. We need to serve the public, and that means value for money has to be at the core of decision making. It is up to management to ensure a cultural change happens. We know that is hard and takes time, but it is an organisational priority. Hilary has a challenging role, and we councillors will support her. Secondly, the procurement team who are driving this are already busy. They need to spend time educating others at the same time as they are working hard to make savings on projects. I remind everyone in council to appreciate the challenge they have to work, and to work with them to make their job easier, because we all depend on their success. Igor has a challenging role, and we councillors will support him. If we address these concerns, then the savings tracker will allow us plenty of opportunity to celebrate success. Right, I will put it to the vote by show of hands. All those in favour?
Carried unanimously.
Okay, we have procured an efficient meeting. Thank you, and I will now close the meeting.